in a lot of trouble. I think if we allow fear to take over our lives, I mean, it's like you can't do anything. You can't, you know, you're stunted. It stunts you. And I think that's a very important thing for our young people, is to learn, and for us to teach them, you know, courage and not to be afraid, you know. Right. Thank you.
The thing that always comes to me back is the collectiveness of what we need to do. And he said this all through his speeches, that one monkey don't make a show. And that always moves me.
All right.
Yeah, my name is Greg Jones, and I'm not affiliated with any particular church, although my wife attends Union Missionary Baptist Church, and that's how I got the flyer about this event. But what I got from this was the importance of a standard of conduct. You begin this by saying, if you had great parents, raise your hand. I raised my hands, but I didn't come from an ideal situation, because my mom and dad, they was at war with each other. So, you know, they say that love should trickle down to the children. Well, when I was growing up, a lot of hate and whatever was trickling down. So I missed out on being taught a lot of great principles from a fatherly figure. So, you know, being in my 50s, I'm still learning a lot of things as a father that I should have known. But unfortunately, life didn't deal me that sweet deck of cards, you know, in that sense. But I said that to say this, that, you know, you see a lot of these immigrant people that come into our communities. Before you know it, they own the store.
All right.
But what you will find from those immigrant communities in many cases, and it's one of their major indictments against our people, is that we lack a code of conduct. We lack a standard. And what I noticed from the young people today is that in many people, they're walking around with their zip pants all down. And not only that, you got the males doing this, but the girls are wearing it as tight as they can wear it. They're showing it off. So, you know, that code of conduct, that standard, we're just really lacking it. And that's what was most important for me that you shared.
We can talk about the kids with the pants down that I can't stand, and the girls with whatever. But I think as Christians, we need to invest in our youth. Our kids are modeling us. And we're often critical of them, and we look at what's negative, and I have to work on it too with my son. But we have, I mean, God put them in our lives as a gift for a short time. And if it's not your own kid, my mother used to say every kid is her kid. I mean, because she would have no problem going and saying, now, sweetie, you need to pull up those pants. Because for her, she took pride in him just like she took pride in my brother, or her just like me. And I was really moved by it, because I don't think we always appreciate the impact that we make on children by little things like, that's a good job, or that we know you can do it, and so that we encourage them. And I think I had those kind of parents. I was fortunate. My parents had a code, as you said. I mean, they expected how you were. They had faith, but they also were reassuring that if you stumbled, there was always a hand that could pull you up. And if they weren't there, God just pulled you up.
I had a story that my supervisor taught me. It was Eugene King, Dr. Eugene King. He told me a story that back in the South, where he was going to college at, that he was working for a Jewish family, working with a Jewish family, and he said how Jewish people had money. And they would take him out to dinner and stuff like that. And he said that they always stuck together. He didn't care if they was rich or poor. The Jewish always would to go into their community and stick together. But when he was trying to tell me to understand, I was trying to ask him, why do blacks don't do the same thing that they do? Because they going backwards instead of going forward and taking the time out and spend with each other. They're always looking at each other a whole different way, disrespecting each other, and not listening to what the grandparents had taught them back then, and it just wiped it away, and they just living a life of, I want this and I got to have this, this was deserved to me, and I should take this because I deserve this. And when I look at it, what my ancestors went through, I should take it another different route in a better way, that it wouldn't be no violence caused to hurt anybody else, but try to get along with each other. That's what I would do.
We're going to hear one more response. You, yeah. At this time, and if you didn't get your reflection in yet, after Sister White, after your response.
What's that?
Oh, yes. After her response, then Mr. McFadden is going to respond to some of the themes he heard, and then we're going to go back around the room to go deeper in this. So the first sweep is immediate reflections, some reaction, and then we're going to go deeper and get ready to go real deep.
Here's what's really scary to me, and that is that we have lost the passion that we had, and we have an environment now that is very scary, and we have a president that's coming up for election, re-election, and we have people out there that are crazy. And yet we have lost our passion to make sure that we make an impact on this next election. So I'm hearing the passion that you had in the days of SNCC just not being around right now, or at least I don't hear it, I don't feel it. And yet we have a very critical period in our history coming to us right now with people who are obviously racist and against us. And yet our passion has dampened where it should be at least there, so that we're able to at least not be back in the days when we had the white and the black signs and things going on, because really we could be back there.
Get tuned into it, because he represents just what you said, that passion. And people say to me that I have a lot of energy and a lot of strength because I'm all over the place in my community. One crisis after another, one situation after another. And there are those folks out there. But it's what we missed is uniting those forces. And I don't know of many different ways to make that clear. How important all of us at some stage in our life either had good parents who were Christian, either ourselves were. And the person who inspires us most happened to be Jesus. And just learn from him. Most people I find that they want to talk to you about Jesus and they don't have a clue. But in all of my teaching as it relates to the Christian faith, I require all of my students, adults and students alike, to do a thesis. She'll tell you about thesis. An in-depth paper, a cross-reference paper on him, on Jesus. And that helps, because that's the first lesson. I mean, you learn from example from your teachers. That's what the person who is feminist, and that was a point that somebody made that I wanted to go back to. Because we all need some help. Jesus knew that he needed some help, so he got 12, he called his the disciples. We, meaning the four of us in here, we had a person, and Alabama just gets all the credit today because there's four of us in here, Kenny included, that have roots in Alabama. But that's where Jimmy Boggs' roots were. And Kenny is the man that he is today. You will find him all across the radio. Whatever is a progressive force that will give you an opportunity to have a voice that put the truth out the way that you know it, that's where he is. But it was because of the nurturing and mentoring that he got, because he got an example of how to do it. And I want to think about the brother here. Sometimes it comes from our biological family, that example, that teaching. And other times it comes from uncles, and it may happen to the pastor, maybe the pastor, maybe somebody down the street. But it must be somebody. We don't get here on our own. Trust me, you don't get where you are on your own. And Kenny, for us, in particular for me, you can look at Kenny and you can look at me, so you know I was older than he was, but there were mentors for him as a young man that showed him the way. And I'm just here today, and he's here today so that you can see him, and he never wavered. He never stopped. He never stopped telling. And folks, about telling the story, I like to come to you and touch you and tell you the story, and tell you those stories that help shape me. Kenny has his own special way of telling those stories through the media. And as I passed out just a little sample of stuff that I had put together of different stages that I was in as his river was flowing, but Kenny has unique ways with the multimedia of telling that story, and we all have to do that. Now, your point about this passion, and I didn't say what I should have said about the Occupy movement because I know I was coming back to that. We get glimpses of hope along the way. And I'm going to tell you, I got a great boost. I got a great shot of help in 2007. I didn't have a clue in 2006 and 2007 who President Barack Obama was. Didn't have a clue. I looked at that name and I said, seems like to me it ought to be connected to Alabama some way, because some of them A's and some of them M's ought to be connected. And let me find out, there's some Alabama connection, only to find out that it wasn't. But I got the greatest shot because we, the four of us particularly, because collectively we were together, and we thought that we had the formula for changing the world, and we thought it was going to happen. And I want to tell you, when you're young, you think that long times are really short times. Now that might sound like a contradiction, but I think about a reporter from New York said to us in Montgomery, when that picture that you see around where the 9 of us were standing on the church steps of First Baptist Church, said to me, he said, young fella, how long do you think it's going to take you all to get this together? And I said, it's going to take a long time. We're going to have it together in 5 years. And folks, here I am, over 50 years later, and it's not together. But I thought that it was going to be a long time, and I thought 5 years was a long period of time. But let me tell you something that Jimmy Boggs, who represents something great to the four of us, because Jimmy Boggs was a black man from Alabama that was not afraid of people who had a college education and a lot of facts and a lot of MDs and ADs and all kind of Ds and everything by their name. And he did it. But he mastered a message that you needed. He said to us on a regular basis, he said, the struggle won't happen in my lifetime. And to us who was a little younger, he said, it might not happen in your lifetime. But if God wakes you up every day, then you better work like that place we don't want to go, with an H and an E and 2 L. He said, you better work like hell. Like you think and know that it's going to happen in your lifetime. And that's what's missing. That it's out there with a few people, but they don't have that passion and that hope. Now, if we had a lot of time, because I like to stay, and maybe we started on a Saturday, and Saturday night we could have broken some of these things down. But one of the things that I find that we haven't laid out a process of how you nurture and teach how to be a good human being. And I guess that's why the teachers in my family were so important, because that is a particular way that you do that. And if you instill it, it won't go away. It may be dormant or may take a shift in another direction, but if you instill it properly. For instance, I just believe that there's no way that if I have my health and strength, and I know all of you believe that if you have your health and strength, I don't care what kind of depression they have, we're going to make it. I'm going to make it. It's just because my parents, my grandparents, and the community taught that it had to be hard work. That must be at the core of it. And the hard work doesn't necessarily generate dollars every day. But it must be hard work. Now, you know we haven't taught us, because we got away from it, teaching our people hard work. And we have to have processes to make sure that it happens. And I said to my grandson, there's no reason for you ever not to have what it is that you need in this society, because there's a process. I put a book in his hand, a Sunday school book, and there are lessons every Sunday. I said, here are a set of questions that you should answer as it relates to the questions that's put forth. And when you answer those questions, you get resources. You get resources for answering them. But that's just our relationship that I have. I want to make sure that he reads and learn how to write some things. So he has to read and he has to write and make sure that he communicates that information to me. It's a step-by-step process. And folks, we all have some sense of it. Flowers and food. We know how to grow them. If you make up a nice bed and don't put anything in it, and go back sometime later and think that you're going to find some corn or some tomatoes or some flowers growing and didn't put any of those seeds down, you're going to be disappointed. There are certain steps. And you need to know that. And you might not follow that path. They might not follow that path, but you have to make sure that they know that. And in Philadelphia, when my son was growing up, my wife and I was only blessed with one son, and that was enough for us. But what happened was, I had to answer, and we had to answer, how do you raise a child in asphalt? Where everything is cement and no ground around. So we had to find a place, a garden, that we could teach the value and the processes that she and I had learned in Alabama. Now, he's not a great gardener now, but he understands that process of what it takes in order to produce things. And that's what you have to do. They might not follow your exact patterns in terms of being farmers or gardeners or teachers or whatever, but they learn the principle and they find ways to apply it. And that's what we have to do. We have to first find somebody else. Find the person that's sitting next to you and say, we are going in the same direction, or at least part of that direction, and we need to work together. Because there's going to be some low time, and I feel just like you, sister, that these are very scary times. They do and say everything, and that's not bad. But what is bad is there is no response. One of the things that inspired us as young students in Alabama was that John Patterson was the governor of Alabama at the time that we moved forward. And one of the things that Patterson said was to people all across the country, and he was wrong, that we don't have to worry about these colored students. And he was being kind publicly at that point. He called us something else otherwise, doing anything. And that was an insult to my intelligence. Personally, it was an insult. And that was a response to what he said. What all of these people said, Bull Connor, people all across the state of Alabama, all across the South. What they said was that it couldn't happen, and we said that it would happen. Do whatever you think you will do, but we're going to stand up with dignity, look good, and demand that the right thing be done. This collective thing that Dr. Jackson spoke about, I've always believed it. And when we came together because of that collective, it's just clear, it's clear to us. And we see the absence of it. And one of the absence of our president would have just been able to triple, and he has done more than any other presidents that we've had, and I have the facts to show that, but it would have tripled if he had not been crippled just before the election. One of the most powerful forces was being able to understand that you need to do the right thing because it's innate. And one of the problems that we had in our organization at the time when we had just gotten to the point, and that's the organization NOAH, that all four of us was in together. Just as we got to the point, and we had a multiracial organization, and we got to the point where we said, in essence, you sisters who represent white women, we had white women in our group, and we said over here, you brothers who represent white men, Jews as well as Gentiles, all white men of all persuasion who represent them. What we're going to stop is we're going to stop y'all from going in the black community telling us what to do. I didn't say that it wasn't too hard. So what you have to do is you have to go to white women and help them transform themselves. It didn't happen then and it hasn't happened now because there's a mentality among white people that they don't need no help. That's a mentality among them that they don't need no help. But we know. All you have to do is just put all of these examples that I gave you together and all of the examples that you come out with to show how inhumane, insensitive, not only they are to us, but to other human beings. Since they obviously didn't have good parents, like a lot of you, these values weren't ingrained in them. They are not there. You know, these guys, they aren't making flubs or just mistakes by saying, I don't care about poor people, I don't care about women. These are not just slips. They don't have those fundamental values of love. And you know, folks, if it's not guided by that, and we were getting some sense of that in the national organization, because we were looking at other countries that was beginning to introduce this. And we had it right in our own hands, right in us, but did not put it forth. But if you don't have those values that systematically taught, that are ingredients that make you whole human beings. Now, one of the things that we know is if you teach it, everybody don't get it. There's a few in there won't get it. Jesus had that. You know about those who betrayed. You know, we know about Judas. Everybody but the majority gets it if they're there. And the ones that don't get it pay a heavy price. So we must. It starts like this. You got to get it right yourself. And one of those pages I showed you, one of the things that was very important, you have to have that change yourself. You have to have that Damascus Road experience that Paul had. You must have that change in yourself because you can't talk about the change to somebody else and haven't made it yourself. Children particularly, young people particularly, they tell you how phony you are. When you're trying to, we don't have a strong voice even to tell them now, but when you're trying to tell them what to do is right and you're doing what's wrong and they see it, just clashes and it doesn't happen. And the last part that really ends with that is this code of conduct. I remember when we would hear things, and particularly we heard about this young doctor, way back early, in the late 50s, that killed all these nursing students. And we heard about it. And when you hear the news, they don't tell you who they are, what color they are. But one of the things that we knew for years, that wasn't none of us. That wasn't a black person who did that. And we could just go down the list for a number of years. We could say, no, that's not him. That's not us. That's not us. That's not us. But because these values have not been taught in us now, that you can't tell the difference. You got to wait until you actually see the person because it's in us to do those atrocious things like it's in them. They were never systematically taught to be good and understand this law on a large scale when it really comes through. And the way that, I'm going to show you how that happens, and then I'm going to move on to my last point that people have mentioned. I remember 10 years ago that if the things that were said last week about women, just that organization now would be so outraged and would have gathered so much momentum. Now, they've had some weak voices that have come forth on some shows and said some things and made some projections, but nothing like what it would have been 10 or 20 years ago. It just would have been an outflow, and even people who didn't embrace all of the code of conduct that the NOW organization did would have followed suit because they would say, that is wrong, and I'm going to stand up with those who are saying that that's wrong. But even that organization that that code is not in our genes. It's not there. My mother, you know, when you're a teenager, 14, 15, and 16 years old, the opposite sex was very important to me. And it was very important. And I had gotten to the point when I was driving, my father would let me have a car every now and then, and this was a Friday night. And I had a very particular, interested person that I was in. So I get dressed, the best that I could get to go out on this very special date. And before I go out on it, my mother goes into one of these teaching moments. She said, now come on, son, and sit down. I know you're getting ready to go out and have a good time. I said, but let me tell you. She would start off by saying, let me tell you about your sister. You know, you said, your sister is just about 15 months younger than you. And you know how we love your sister. We know how you love your sister. We know how you love us. She would say, now when you go out tonight, I don't want you to think about or do anything anybody else's sister. You know how our sister, you know. And when my mother got through, I just went on in my room and found something that I could read and study. It just came all of the wind out of my sails, and I didn't want to go out. I mean, that lesson was just that important. But we don't get those. We don't get those. You know, and I'm going to tell you how it shifted. My son came along, and at the time that I came along, I had to really strategize. I had to strategize for my parents on how to get out. And then the person that I was going out with, I had to strategize how to make the best impression on them and their family. Because it wasn't just going out with somebody. I had to know and meet the family. I had to strategize. The next generation came along. My son didn't even have to come up with no strategy. Because they were just at the door. I mean, we would just have to send them away and just have more lessons with them. You got to tell these people they can't come over. They just can't come over. There's too many of them. You don't need to know that many young ladies. You know, but it had just, now I had to develop a strategy to go out to try to find, and he didn't have to do anything. They were just beating a pathway to our door. So I'm talking about how these values and the code of conduct and code of standard have shifted. And we see it in our church. You don't have that problem. I know you don't have that problem in St. Matthew. But our children in churches that I'm real close and affiliated, they have no code or ethics for the church. You know, I know that see, they don't have it in St. Matthew, but I know the ones that I go to in Philadelphia and all over the rest of the country. There is no code. I go out and be out on a Saturday night, and when I get to most churches and look around at what the congregation looked like on Sunday, I don't know whether it looked like they're in the same places I looked in Saturday night. That's just the way they dress. And the funny thing, not funny, but sad thing about it is nobody is saying anything about it and nobody is changing. They even come up with scriptures that fit. You know what they say. You can't do anything to them because they said, the Bible said, come as you are. They take it out of context. Come as you are. They throw that up in you. You can't even tell them about the code of conduct here at St. Matthew because they tell you, I can come as they are. And if I don't come looking like you think I need to look to church, it's all right because you can't tell. I can come as I want to. But folks, we know where that takes us. And my hopeful message is that you begin to tell that different story. And you can't wait until next year or next month. You need to start today. And you become that spark, that hope. Because if people see, you know, I find that people are saying, I don't know the answer to the problem. And they are in all of our churches all across the country. And that's the most disgusting thing I hear adults say. And I don't know what to do with these people. I don't know what to do. And that's where we are, folks. And if these things sound familiar to you, then you have to say, I do know. And every time I hear, I know what should be said to these young people. But I tell you what, it works you. It's not that you can say it, and that's it. It works you because you have to follow those processes and you have to find a way to get the message across. And it can't be go to your room and turn the next television on. They have to find a way to sit down and listen to you. And sometimes it might take you half of the day or half of the night.
You mentioned young people here at St. Matthew a few times. Okay, now young people here at St. Matthew do have a code ethic. Get on up there, show them. Get on up there. Okay. Go ahead. Tell them who you are.
I'm brilliant.
Yeah, come on.
I'm brilliant. God placed genius in me. I didn't come here to compete. I came here to excel. I'm full of joy because I know I do well.
And it takes time, and that's what makes it different. And I started off by saying, that's why I'm honored at St. Matthew, because it's making a difference.
All right, I promised you that we would go around again. That's the teacher in me. We heard your reflections. You heard Mr. McFadden respond. We have about 10 minutes, so that means we got to do rapid fire. Rapid fire. No long dissertation. That's right. If you have a question before because we get ready to leave here. So if there's something burning that you want to know and ask him, you got 10 minutes to do. Mr. Harris.
Mr. McFadden, do you think we'll ever have another man like Martin Luther King in this time era?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to, I haven't said a lot about the Occupy movement that you saw in the last year, because again, it was young people. It was young people a lot that reminded me of 50-some years ago when young people were standing up in different ways across the country. And I think so. That person might be right here in St. Matthews tonight. We don't really know. But we do know that at each generation and at each time, someone is going to answer the call. And that's what I put out. Somebody is going to hear the call. And we keep telling the story. And if you keep telling the story, some person that you tell the story to is going to hear the call. Somebody is going to hear the call. And that for me, it started with a number of experiences. It could have been that Kresge's experience wearing that water fountain, and I wanted to know about how I could get some of that white water. Or it may have been that Boy Scout troop that we would go out on Saturdays hoping that somebody would start a fire, that we could get some practice at doing some community service.
Let me just say this right quick. The call is not for one. The call is for all. Okay? Part of our problem is that we're looking for somebody else to.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
And all of us have a responsibility. Max said it real clearly. I don't want y'all to miss that. Okay? All of us have responsibility to God and to each of us.
That's right.
And it's time for us to be about what we're supposed to be about. They're looking for a king because it wasn't just king. You know, if you actually study, you know, it wasn't just king. You know, it wasn't just Rosa Parks. There are thousands, literally, that were engaged, involved, committed. And you are them now. Okay? We are those that the call is for. Yes, sir. The call is to all of us. You know, if we go to Matthews, if we go to the Great Commission, it didn't say Martin or Malcolm or Jenny or John. It said, go. Go. And you start where you are. You know, are you committed to the people in your own house? Are you committed to all the kids in that school? You know, are you committed to everyone in that community? You know, are you committed to everyone in your city, in your state? You know, are you committed to God's work for all humankind? And it's time that we not look for a king, but that we look for the king in us. Okay? How bold are you? You know, how strong are you? There's nothing stronger than the Holy Spirit. If you got it in you, you can be about it. And that's what the call is about.
One more question? Yes.
Giving honor to God and to the pastor and first lady of this house, to this wonderful brother here who journeys far and journeys far often with what he's saying. Just thankful to be here and hear these very encouraging words. This brother is an actual walking, talking book of glorious history. And I am so very much impressed with what God has blessed him with in terms of the energy and the passion that he still brings to the table after 10 and 3. And I know what that is, but I'm going to just be coded up. Y'all can get that up. Cheering. Okay. Cheering to get that straight. But just a couple things, because I just told brother here, I ain't good at short things. Days is long and years are short. So brother, when you told him 5 years, you didn't know. We think days is just, but then next thing we know, these young children over here that we see, they're going to be grown. And if we don't do what we got to do with them right now, working with them and sacrificing for them and teaching them and being an example for them as well as talking to them. Because children listen to what you say, but they watch what you do. That's the way this thing works. So our brother here, pastor of this church, was very impassioned in what he said, and he was right on point. Yes, we can look for another Martin Luther King Jr., but that king that's on the inside of us is who we should be looking for. Almighty God is the one who is going to lead us into what we should be found doing. If we are his people, and we are. But see, we still suffer from the legacy of slavery. And so we take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. And we keep doing that over and over and over and over again. And we need to understand that psychological damage that we've suffered. Okay, let me stop, because I said I get started. I don't want to stop. But praise God for what's going on here at this church today. And I'll say this, as brother said to me before, this church should be overflowing right now. Ain't no doubt about that. But there's no other place to be in Lansing but right here. Listen to this wonderful brother that God sent here to give us a word of truth and history and an example of what we can work toward becoming in our own way. Because we're all individuals, but as he said, we need to come together. And the only way we're going to win this thing is if we come together. One last point. Barack Obama, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, is like Jonah was to Nineveh. When Jonah preached to Nineveh, Nineveh heard and repented. The king, I don't know, I think it was King Darius or whatever his name was. They repented. He began to pray, put on sackcloth and ashes, and Nineveh could have been destroyed, but wasn't. So is the United States of America going to be Nineveh, or is it going to be Babylon? We know what happened in Babylon.
All right.
Okay, Dr. Jackson.
Brother, would you stand up and look at the camera and give me your name?
Oh, that's what you're saying. All right.
Okay. My name is William Muhammad. I'm from Muskegon, Michigan. I'm involved in the James Jackson Museum of African American History in Muskegon. That hasn't been formally renamed yet, but it will be soon. And I'm a member of the Nation of Islam.
A final comment, and then Pastor, do you want Mr. McFadden to close out first, and then you give final words, or the other way around? Think about that. Dr. Jackson. Dr. Jackson.
Matt, will you kind of go over how, as a student at Alabama State, how you overcame the fears in order to begin to make your long journey to changing how student lives and our lives work. What you have to do inside, tell yourself.
And since that was the last question, I'll go ahead and say whatever Pastor says should be said. One of the things I had just written down before Dr. Jackson got up is that we really don't listen. We really don't listen. It can be as clear and right in our face. If we go back to 2007 and 2008, our president said to all Americans, folks, don't get trapped. He was saying, have my back. Don't leave me out here by myself. It's not about me. Pastor said it very eloquent. I've been saying it all along. The first step is this teaching process is to teach courage. We said code of conduct. You have to teach courage. One of the things I noted and put down is that freedom is not free.
That's right.
It's fought for. And it's freedom. Now we got it. This is teaching, folks, and this is what we don't do. We don't listen and we don't take the time to actually teach. We throw it out, and that's maybe why we need to look at it. One of the pages that I had, and one of the things that I want to say, I brought my book, one of my favorite books. This was our lawyer. He didn't do the marching. He wasn't out on these picket lines. But if it had not been for him, we wouldn't be here to tell the story. Fred Gray. Not only was he Dr. King's lawyer, not only was he the lawyer for the Southern Christian Council, but he was the 9 of our lawyers that represented and wrote this case up that I told you about that you can Google on what made it possible for students. That was possible. So what we're saying and what the pastor said that was so important. What did Dr. King say? This is why I said we don't listen. Dr. King made it crystal clear. You don't have to be the best doctor. But if you are a doctor, be the best doctor. If your slot in life, if you were dealt that hand of cards, that whatever was missing, you had to take the half a deck that you got, and you had to make the best of it. If it was a half a deck, you take that half a deck and play it like it's a whole deck. Play like you think it's the best deck. Whatever it is. At the beauty shop or wherever you go, as that nurse's aide, that classroom assistant, that noonday servant, just whatever it is, be the best. Dr. King, no. The president had it. I mean, if we were doing what we were supposed to be doing as a people, he would even be greater than Dr. King. No, it's no question about it. Dr. King said that. Be the best that you can be. And whatever it is, but make sure you're doing it and you're telling somebody about it. Folks, that's what's important. None of us. Dr. King would have been the first to tell you. Malcolm would have been one of the first to tell you. And one of the reasons that happened, every time we let our guard down, it happened. It happened to us. If you don't have that protection that you need, forget about it. We all saw Whitney Houston, right in front of us. A soul is gone much too soon. Somebody was never supposed to let Whitney out of their sight. She had got to that stage in life. Folks, and look what happened in just that little 30-minute slip of time. There's not a lot of talk about how we don't do what we're supposed to do. I don't take care of patients, but Dr. Jackson has been taking care of patients for a long period of time and doing a great job at taking care of the patient with the best strategies and the best foot that he could put forward. And the problem is, we are not putting our foot forward. You don't like spending your time in airports and all over places and in cars and up and down the highway, but you cannot tell the story if you don't live the story. If you think being out front with the collective word that might not be good, you got to be there. And it's not like you're trying to get on camera, because we don't need to be on camera. But I tell you what, when you tell young people a story and they ask, where were you? You ought to be able to find a way to show that you were there. You ought to find a way to show that you swept that floor very good and made it shiny. That you took the case. You know, everybody didn't have to march, and I'm not saying that. And what I'm saying, and what I said very, very clearly, this thing, courage. Courage is not just being crazy and think nothing bad will happen to you, but courage is having the inner strength to stand up, and when you see somebody doing something that they should not be doing, whether it's the Congress of the United States, or whether it's a radio talk host, somebody's, and it ought to be bodies, I'm putting an S on it, it might not quite sound like, but I'm putting an S on it, which means that it's more than one person collectively ought to be coming together to say it was wrong. You know, so if you don't like what Rush Limbaugh said about women, you ought to be mad when somebody got the audacity to come to church and put their finger in the pastor's face. You ought to be upset about it. You know, he maybe shouldn't even have to say nothing, because before they could take their finger down, somebody that stood up in every corner and said, you can't do that here. You can't do that here. And all of us believe that those things shouldn't have happened, and we have not found ways to unite with somebody and make a loud noise around the world that is not going to happen to us. And folks, I'm like you. I'm tired of it happening to us. And I know there are millions of us that have stories to tell that have made our life different, and we are not letting our light shine. And you know that story. We have a mandate. We have a mandate to make sure, because we represent. We represent. You know, Vincent Harding said there's a river and there are many souls swimming down that stream, and it's carrying them. And you got to be able to show somebody in that stream where you are, and why they too must be in that stream and be able to tell somebody. If you don't know where that motivation is going to come from, if somebody don't teach us courage, somebody don't teach us how to have less fear, and believe that it's that burning in your bones and in your soul that I got to tell somebody what they ought to be doing in order to be a good human being. You must be committed to that idea. And folks, we must pay attention to the present reality and look at what it was that brought us to this point. You know, if you go back to Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, W.E.B. Du Bois, and it just goes on regardless of what your IQ is all about. And the flaw in our analysis was that all of these tendencies didn't get united into one solid force. And we know what that force is. It burns and it shines in all of us. And and the thing about it is, when you misrepresent yourself, it's hard for you to get up. You know, when you not only have been beaten down by the outside forces, but beat yourself down. And I'm just here to say that, number one, you must have the strength and the determination to tell the message. You must have a message. You must be committed to it, and you must pay attention, and you must make sure you are doing it with somebody else. And that freedom ain't free, that you got to fight for. Struggle for. And let me just give you my last example. And those of you who know a lot about Paul. Paul showed us what commitment is all about. Paul started out that if you show me where they are, I'm going to go get them and I'm going to do away with them. I don't care what you say to me or what you try to do. If you show me where they are, I'm going to get them and do away with them. When he had his conversions and decided that that was a great message to tell, he told them up until they took his breath away that I'm going to tell you the story. I don't care whether you like it or not. It's nobody can do it like Jesus. Yes, and you better get to know him, and you better understand the values and the principles. And that's what I'm saying to you. You got to keep telling it, Even when they're about to cut your breath off, you still got to say, you might take it, but you can't take it because I know who give it.
That's
You
right.
didn't give it, and you can't take it away.
That's right.
James McFadden. And recognize. Amen.
I think that was a good session. Amen. Now, don't be scared. I know y'all know that y'all in the church, and you know the pastor's here, but no, there will not be a collection. There's a couple things though. Yeah, y'all sit. It's not going to be long, but you can sit down. Not only did Jimmy do a good job, as I knew he would, otherwise he wouldn't be here, but I think Pat Coleman Burns did a good job too. She served as moderator today, but I know not only the level of intelligence that she has, but also the level of experience that she has with movement and students. So I want to give you an opportunity to make a couple comments, observations, or to postulate something into their minds that you would like.
Well, thank you for all coming out. What is burning my reflection, what really caught me, was this whole notion of how dangerous the times are. That if we did not fix things when we had the opportunity to, we had a civil rights movement, we were in the streets, we were marching, then we had another chance in 2008. We had one. Folks said it couldn't happen. And we sat there on that night. My students came to school at the University of Michigan, celebrated, cheering, when other kids booed. And today the young people are saying, what happened? We got complacent. This is not the time to rest. If you haven't ever been involved before, now is the time. Because when somebody can start talking about your daughter and putting their hands on your daughter, and we sit by and simply watch, then shame on us. What mean these stones? What is it when our children ask us, where were you? Did you show up? What mean these stones? How did we make it over? If we don't have a story to tell, shame on us. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
It's been so hard for him all his life. Because I'm his daddy and she's his mom. But you are the only representation of your generation. We'd like to hear from you.
Dr. Robert Burns.
Who you talking?
Dr. Robert Samuel Burns.
Dr. Jackson.
How you doing?
It's good to see you, Matt. Good to see you, Kenny, everybody. Very happy to be here and to listen to all the wisdom and experience that's shared here. And it is a call to action. I've been listening to what's going on politically. And I actually watch a fair amount of Fox News to see what these people are talking about. When I listen to what was happening, like for example during like the beginning of the war, during the beginning of the Afghanistan war and the Iraq war, and hearing people not wanting to pay any attention to what people what the other side was saying. I think that was a big part of why it was so difficult on this side. And when I look at this political process, I want to see what the opposition to progress is saying so that we can fight it better. And I'm always amazed at how little respect for the facts or the truth is out there, how they're not deterred by the truth, they're not deterred by facts. And I'm interested to see what we're going to do. I'm interested to see what we're going to, how we're going to move forward, how we're going to light that fire again, instead of just watching Barack Obama and saying, well, either he got it done or he didn't get it done, or why didn't he get it done? This man came into office, and from day one, these people decided that their whole agenda was to make sure the president didn't succeed.
Amen.
And they called people that were against Bush anti-American. So it's not really incumbent upon Obama as much. It's not really even the responsibility of people that are against Obama to do something different. It really is on us. It's about what we're going to do, how we're going to say that we're not okay with certain things that are happening. We're not okay with facts not being important. We're not okay with mistruths not being important. And what are we going to do about it? Because, maybe he's going to win. I think he's going to win. I think he's got a pretty good chance of winning. But if he does, then what? We still got, it's still not, that's not the end of it. That's another chance at us doing what we collectively didn't do, in my opinion, a great job of in the last 4 years, which is really stepping up and doing our part. So I thought what you had to say earlier about the king within us, or really whether you meant Martin Luther King or the king within us, I thought that was very
name. His name is Jesus.
Yeah, I'm familiar. But it'll be interesting to see if what we do and how much responsibility we put on ourselves, because that is what it's all about. So, thank you for coming out. Great to see you again, Matt. And thanks for the opportunity to say something.
He is a doctor of physical therapy. He deals with cross-section of cultures as well as intergenerational. So every day he has an opportunity to engage. And every day you have an opportunity to engage. And we are simply saying, be bold, be strong, hold on to your history. Your history is as valuable as any other history. In fact, your history is what created this world.
That's right.
And brought us to where we are. So hold on to it and engage, folks. Now, Kenny, what's the name of your book?
From Victimization to Empowerment, the Challenge of African American Leadership, the Need of Real Power.
Would you say it once again?
It's called From Victimization to Empowerment, the Challenge of African American Leadership, the Need of Real Power.
Right. And you won one award for that book?
No.
The Cuban Award.
Oh, I won the award in Cuba for the international writing contest that they had to celebrate their 50th anniversary of their revolution.
Somebody ought to shout about that. Jimmy Jackson, stand up, please. His name has been mentioned, but there wasn't a fullness of understanding of who he is. James Jackson brought the civil rights movement to Muskegon, Michigan. It's James Jackson, who's been in the struggle for over 50 years also, that founded the Museum for African American History in Muskegon.
Other people help too.
I didn't ask you to say it, I asked you to stand up. Now, if you're going to talk, I'm going to have to have you sit down, and then I'm going to scold you for talking while I'm talking. All right? That's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, we know it was a deck of cards, not one.
No, ain't nothing anybody ever did by themselves other than fail. And we know that everybody contributes to every big thing. But anything worthwhile, y'all heard this before, always starts with the few. It doesn't start with the many. Say that again. Because I want you to get beyond minority thinking.
That's right.
Anything worthwhile always starts with the few. It never starts with the many. Y'all take that home. Y'all sit on that. Then you get up and you see who's around you that's like-minded, that you can unite with and cause something else to happen. Again, I thank Jimmy for coming. We've got refreshments downstairs. Again, we thank Jimmy for coming. Yeah, we got refreshments downstairs, but up here, what we have is the pastor of Trinity AME Church. And I would ask, Reverend Lila Martin, would you give us a benediction? And come in your own way.
Amen.
But please come